It's my incredible pleasure to introduce the speaker today, Sharon Solomon, the wife of Paul Solomon, our founder. I had the pleasure of meeting Sharon about 40 years ago, plus a few extra days, when we were a little bit younger, and I instantly felt kinship with her without even knowing why. Like an old soul, an old friend that you were meeting again. And she's always a sister to me. Sharon's a friend to many people, a fellow sojourner and student with many people, and a teacher and mentor to many people. She inspires us. She creates laughter and joy and love. Having known her this long, I've seen her in many situations, and I have many stories, which I won't tell now. And including she saved my life once when my sleeve caught on fire. There's a whole other story. But anyway, I appreciate Sharon, and I count us all as fortunate that she is in our family and that she's here today to share with us. So let's open our hearts and minds to receive her message. Welcome, Sharon.
I want to talk a little about Paul's life, Paul Solomon's life. Paul was the son of a Baptist minister, and all his uncles were Baptist ministers, and he lived in a very strict Baptist home. He never drank, he never smoked, he never cussed. And when he was in his teens, his dream was to be a preacher, and he did the traditional thing. He went to seminary, he got married, he had a child, and then one day his wife fell on somebody else, and his wife left him, and in that day, in the late 50s, there was no such thing as a divorced Southern Baptist minister, and in one day he lost his wife, his child, and his career. And he still believed in God, but he became very angry at God. And he tried to think of what was the most rebellious thing he could do. So he went out and bought a pack of cigarettes, smoked the whole thing, became very sick. Then he went out and bought a beer. One beer didn't do anything, so he kept drinking beer. Then he got into sex and drugs, and the way he says it, if they're there for 5 years, if there was anything he didn't do, it was just because he didn't think of it. After 5 years, he found that he was sitting one day in his house, which was kind of decorated in, it was like animal fabric, a leopard couch, and very strange kind of pictures around, but he had hamsters. And he was sitting on the couch, and he was looking at the hamsters, and the hamsters were on this wheel. You know how hamsters have this wheel, and they were going round and round and round and round. And he realized that's what his life had become. Now, when he was in the Army, he was in the Army between these times, before he became the Southern Baptist minister, he worked with in a mental hospital, and he saw a lot of patients that were catatonic, and he realized that he was becoming that. His mind was stopping working. He wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't doing anything. So he started looking for solutions. And he also, when he was in the Army, he worked some with hypnosis, and he thought, well, maybe that would be a possibility of getting hypnotized and see if he could find a direction in his life. So he went to this fancy hypnosis clinic in San Antonio, and they told him all about the possibilities, and he thought, well, this is going to work for me. And then they told him the price, and there was no way he could afford it. So he became even more depressed. And he went to his local bar, and he sat down, and he was telling his friend who sold him dope of his problems. And his friend Harry said, well, I hypnotized somebody once. And Paul said, okay, let's try it. So they went back to Paul's apartment. He lay down on his leopard couch. And his friend Harry took a little pendulum thing and started swinging it. And the way Paul tells it, he thought that Harry was about to bore him to death. And the next thing he remembers was waking up with excruciating pains in his stomach, and Harry was jumping up and down. A spirit spoke through you. You said all these things. You said these wonderful things. We have to do this again. We have to try this again. And Paul said, well, what do you expect when you hypnotize a Southern Baptist minister? You're going to get some stuff that sounds like spirits. And he threw Harry out. But Harry came back the next day, and the next, and the next, and the next, and Paul threw him out every time until one day Harry appeared with a tape recorder, and he said, those things that you said could not have come from you. You're not that smart. Now that impressed Paul with the tape recorder. The fact that Harry would go out and actually purchase a tape recorder really impressed me. He said, okay, we'll try it. But there's 3 conditions. 1, he wanted to find out what caused the cramps. The second thing he wanted to do was to find out who or what this was communicating. And the third thing, he wanted to find a question that he didn't know the answer to, Harry didn't know the answer to, but that could be verified. Did you ever try to come up with that kind of a question? Well, it took a while, but Paul's grandfather had been murdered many years before. And there was a family myth that his grandfather had lots of money, but nobody could find it. This was like for 20 years. And they thought, well, if this communication has any validity, they'll be able to find out the answer to that question. So Paul laid down again, and Harry began the boring hypnosis routine. And Paul woke up again with cramps in his stomach. And Harry again was jumping up and down. But this time, they had taped the communication. And this voice that spoke through Paul didn't sound like his voice at all. It sounded like a much more mature, authoritative voice. A much softer yet sweeter but stronger voice. And it said that it was not a spirit that was talking. It was not another personality. It was nothing other than Paul himself. In fact, the voice said it was the rest of Paul's mind. It said that we only use about 10% of the mind. And he knew it couldn't be the conscious mind because he didn't understand that. It couldn't be the subconscious mind because this did come from his memory. It was an intelligence of a greater mind. And in subsequent readings, it was explained that this intelligence is the source of mind. It knows how to create a body. It knows how to work your body. I mean, did you ever think if you had to make your heart beat and your lungs work and your digestive system work at the same time, even if you knew how they all operated, you couldn't even coordinate that and do it together. But this intelligence, which is a part of every one of us, knows how to do all those things, and it is also the intelligence that heals. And this is the intelligence that knows everything from the beginning of time. The subsequent readings explain, they called it readings, the term readings, of course, comes from the Edgar Cayce source and other sources. At the time, they didn't know Edgar Cayce. The source said in that first communication that they weren't really ready for the information that was available from these communications, and that they should study the Search for God books, which were available from the ARE. Now, Paul and Harry had never heard of Cayce, so they said, what is the ARE? And in the reading itself, it said, the ARE is the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and they gave us the address and the zip code. So they sent away for the Search for God books and began studying. Now, the other questions, they said that the cramps were caused by Paul's consciousness leaving the body, which it did for these communications, is a process similar to death. And when his body underwent this, it thought it was dying, so it clinched itself and it caused the cramps. And once he realized that he wasn't going to die, the cramps would stop, and they did. About the question that was verifiable, they said that the money was in the chimney of the house that his grandfather owned. And the house had burned down, but there was a chimney of brick that was on that property. And in the chimney, they found the money. And at the time, his grandmother needed heart surgery. It was before Medicare and all those things. And there was just enough money to pay for that heart surgery. It was a lot of money in the great-grandfather's time, but in the early 70s, it wasn't that much, but it was enough. So Paul continued to do these readings. He worked with Harry for quite some time, and they asked just about every question they could think of. When Paul started doing the readings, it was very foreign to him, because growing up in a Southern Baptist background, anything like readings was of the devil. And he started getting really scared of what is the source of these readings? Is it God or the devil? Let me back up and say, when Paul was a young man or a young child, he had some extraordinary experiences because he could see lights around people. And he would tell his parents, when he was a little boy, he would say, this is a person with good lights, and this is a person with bad lights. And his parents said, you may see lights, but please don't tell us about it, and don't tell anybody else about it, because that's just not done in the Southern Baptist community. So he kind of turned that off. He didn't learn how to read until he was about 10 years old, because he found the process very boring and tedious. And when he took a book and he put it on his stomach, or if he slept with it, he could get the information from his book. And I talked to his brother years later. His brother was so angry at that because his brother would study and study and study and never could get good grades. And Paul would take a book, go like this, go out to play, and he would get the A's. That worked for him for a while until one day his friends found out that he had this ability, and they started giving him people's notebooks and asked him to put it on his stomach and find out what was in the notebook. And he did this. This girl, he put one in his notebook, and this girl had a crush on this guy, and he told the whole school about that. The girl was very upset about it when he told the principal. His mother got called in, and his mother then called him to the kitchen table, and Paul knew when he was called to the kitchen table, he was in trouble. And he sat down with his mother, and his mother said, "We've known from the time that you were born that you've had some extraordinary abilities. Now, we know that from the Bible that these abilities are possible, but these abilities either come from God or from the devil. If you're using these abilities to help people, we know they're from God." And she stopped there. And Paul went back to his room believing that he was of the devil, and that night he tried to kill himself. He slashed his wrists, ended up in the hospital. And as a result of that experience, after a few months of torturous mind searching and wondering, he had an extraordinary experience of running through an open field into the arms of the Christ. And it was at that point that he was ordained as a Baptist minister. But now he was in a situation again where he didn't know whether what he was doing was of God or of the devil. And the person he trusted most to know that was his father. So he scheduled a trip to Texarkana, where his father lived, from San Antonio, and he told him about these extraordinary communications that he was getting. And he asked his father, "What do you think?" And his father said, "It is of God." Now this is from a Southern Baptist minister. Paul was so shocked he started taking the opposite side of the argument. And he said, "What? How could you possibly think that?" And his father said, "For two reasons. The first reason is because in the Bible, there's stories of people doing what you've done. The book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and Daniel went in with his friends, he went to sleep. And after he went to sleep, he went back to Nebuchadnezzar and interpreted his dream. And the second reason, he said, that ever since you left the ministry," he told Paul, "your mother and I have prayed for you every day. And it says in the Bible that when you ask for your son, if you ask for your son to have a piece of bread, God doesn't give him a stone. And if you ask for a fish, he doesn't give you a scorpion. I pray to God every day, and I know he did not give me a stone or a scorpion." He said, "Go back and do this work." And his father said, "And then tell me how you do it, because I want to do it too." So Paul went back doing this work, and there were many, many miracles through the years. And I'll tell you the many, many miracles at another time. Maybe I'll put some in if I have some time. But I want to tell you a little about my story. I never saw life, and I don't have that kind of an extraordinary story. But what we're talking is about how lives can change, how that God, the most important part of Paul's message is God lives within each of us. And we're not stuck the way we were born. We can change and we can grow, and we can become more and more of what God is and express it in our lives. I grew up in a Jewish home, and we were not religious at all, but we went to an Orthodox temple. And I wanted to be an Orthodox Jew and go to Israel and work on a kibbutz. I don't know why I thought I wanted to work on a kibbutz, because I never liked housework or gardening. That's what they do in a kibbutz. But that was my fantasy anyhow. I was going to be this extraordinary Orthodox Jew. And my mother's dream for me was to marry a nice Jewish boy. And I thought that would happen now. So this was my dream now. So I get to high school, very religious and all the Jewish girls have a sorority, and I was the only one that was not asked to join the sorority, and I was devastated. So I was kind of ostracized from the Jewish community. Now, at the same time, my best friend was Pentecostal, and so I went to the Pentecostal church with my friend, and they were nice to me. Of course, they wanted to convert me, but they were really, oh, Sharon, well, that wasn't my name at the time, but, oh, we'd love to see you, this is wonderful. But I saw in that Pentecostal preacher a small man who had all kinds of adversities in his life, but he had a kind of joy that I had not seen anywhere else. I never wanted to convert, but I did love this boy, this wonderful boy that I decided, well, I was going to marry him. I kind of forgot my nice Jewish boy. No Jewish boy ever asked me out. And I liked this other boy. And he said to me, Sharon, I like you. You're a very nice girl, and I would love to date you, but you're going to hell. So there were my two avenues. So I decided to become an atheist. I went to college, and I was a misfit everywhere. And so I went to college. In that time, this was the late 60s, there were only two possibilities for women. You could become a secretary, or you could become a teacher. Now, you became a secretary or a teacher because you went to college to get married, but if your husband should leave you or die, you should have a profession. You think I'm kidding? That's what I was told. But I didn't want to be a teacher or a secretary, so I decided on a profession that is great for misfits. I became a journalist. If you look today, journalists, they can go in, they can have all kinds of adventures, go into all kinds, explore all areas of life, but they don't have to be participants in it. You see, you can stand on the sidelines, you can ask questions, you can have your self-esteem and be very, very important because you're not involved with anybody or anything. And you write about what people tell you. So I thought that was a great profession, and besides which, I was so shy that I was afraid. I was afraid to order a pizza. I was so shy. But I figured that if I became a journalist, then I didn't have to have friends. I could just, ask questions and be separate. So I did that. It was a wonderful profession, and I loved it for many years. But then, all my friends on the newspaper I was working with got better jobs, and they all quit. And so I decided I better get a good job too. And I applied for the Bergen Record, which was a real good paper, and I got a job on the copy desk with a salary of about twice as much as I was getting before, and I worked from 2 in the morning to 9 in the morning, and I never woke up and got fired from that job. And as a result, I ended up taking ILC and coming down to the fellowship because Paul came to town and I had no job. So anyway, I only have a couple more minutes, so I want to tell you this.
Keep going.
So I came down to the fellowship, and I was challenged by Paul very early. Because I came down to the fellowship kind of as a journalist. I was going to stay apart from people and just observe and write. And when I had the opportunity to go to Israel, and we had a baptism in the Jordan River, and I said I would watch, and Paul said to me, you have to make a decision. Either you're going to be a part of this group or not. If you're not going to be a part of this group, then you can watch. But the group was forming, and we were learning and growing together and getting all these teachings. I wouldn't be a part of that. And that's when I said, okay, I'm not going to be the misfit observer. I'm going to be a part of it. Now, you might say that it didn't go smoothly. I mean, I resisted a lot of things during those years. And but from that moment on, I decided that that I would participate. And the hardest thing for me was to accept Jesus growing up Jewish, because growing up Jewish, Jesus was responsible for everything that bad ever happened to the Jewish people. And because of that, it was his fault everything that bad happened to me. And the first thing I saw when I walked into the fellowship building was this big picture of Jesus. And the second thing I saw was this woman who had spoken at this metaphysical center that I went to in New Jersey, who I walked out on because she was saying, "Praise the Lord, praise Jesus." And so Paul could communicate about the Christ consciousness and about what we're praying to, the God within, in a way that was acceptable to me, but I couldn't get through that gap until my name became Sharon. And he gave me the name Sharon because Jesus was the Rose of Sharon, and he said every time people would call me Sharon, it would work subliminally on me, and I would come to love Jesus, and I did, and I do. And so I saw many miracles in the fellowship. I'm back to that for 40 years. This October, I will be here for 40 years. This has been a very difficult year for me. I had a heart attack. My brother, who's the last living member of he has children, but he was the last person I felt that knew me well. And he died. And Paul's work wasn't getting out, and I was feeling so guilty because I hadn't done what I wanted to do, because that's all I wanted to do was get Paul's work out. I felt that was my life purpose. And so after my brother died, I came down here, and I was so devastated, but what happened was that miracles happened. And the first thing that happened was that my best friend was cured of cancer, which I thought I was going to lose my brother and my best friend at the same time. The second thing that happened was that people just encompassed me with their love. I mean, Glenda and Heidi and Susan and Lloyd, and I had a family, and Sarah, and Carol, people that I'd known for years, that Sam and Dad, I look around, it's everybody. Just Jerry, everybody was Dick, everybody was so wonderful to me. So I didn't feel alone anymore. And then the other miracle was Miles. He stood up and he said he was studying Paul's work, and he knew computers. So I took him home. And we are about to open up a website, paulsolomon.com, and Miles is going to tell you about our project just for a couple of minutes.
I had a dream about 3 months ago in a tent on the big island of Hawaii that I was living on a farm. But it wasn't a big farm. It was kind of like this miniature farm with this farmer who was kind of trying to be a farmer. And cut to 3 months later, that's where I am. At a place called Burke's Garden, or what they call God's thumbprint, living with Sharon. And when I'm not chasing pigs around to find a new way to escape every day, we're converting all of Paul's lectures and the readings, putting them into digital format, and organizing a place that we call the Ark of the Covenant, which is her green storage shed. And somehow we have a website. I've never made one before, but with technology today, it came together pretty quickly. It's not complete, but it's in the beginning stages, and we have some audio and video up there right now. The last sentence of the mission statement that we read today said part of the mission is to share Paul's work, and that's what I want to do, and I know that's obviously what Sharon wants to do. So it's paulsolomonmysteryschool.com, and if you stay after lunch, maybe I'll show you guys how to navigate it. It's very simple. I know all you guys are very tech savvy, but I made it very simple, and there's audio lectures that you can preview and buy on the site, and playlist on YouTube with videos, interviews, and readings, and all that. So I look forward to everyone checking it out. Thanks a lot.
So in this planetary mystery school, you never know what's going to happen day by day, but God lives inside of you. And you have a teacher, and I have a teacher, and nothing happens that isn't approved by your teacher. And though things one day might not seem the best things, they can turn out to be blessings. And you are loved by the source who created you, and you're loved by this family. You're very fortunate to be a part of this fellowship. This is our home. And this is a place of joy and of love and of wonderful people. Thank you.